Welcome again to another episode of the Franchise Everything podcast, where we talk about everything and anything franchising. And today we are once again at the Hire A Hubby offices in Kingsgrove in Sydney. And this time we're joined by CEO Brendan Green. G'day, Brendan.
G'day, Glenn. How you going?
Very good, thank you, mate. Very good.
That's all right.
Thanks so much for inviting us down here today to talk to a bunch of franchise partners who are loving the business and really getting a taste of it, mate. It's much appreciated.
Yeah, no, pleasure, mate. It's just nice to see guys that are happy with the decisions they've made and just the diversity they've got with the way they run the business, and all have a way of doing it differently, but getting the same outcome, personal satisfaction and a good return.
Yeah, it's great. It's just great to hear different stories about how and why people get into business and how they do what they do and get that outcome, I think. So it's good to see those diverse stories out there. So, but this one's about you. We're going to talk about you as the leader in this business, and this is a business leader podcast about the Hire A Hubby business, about yourself and your personal journey as well. So where did it all start for you? It didn't all start in Hire A Hubby, but initially. But where did it start from you when you started in your business career?
I had a really good business mentor when I was a kid. Started doing a bit of work for him when I was at school. Had a property development business, and I'd sort of get to school on a Thursday and warm up the boys who wanted to do a bit of work on the weekend. I'd chat to the boss on the Thursday night. He'd tell me how many he needed to do some basic labouring work. I'd go back to school on Friday and coordinate it.
So this is what, year 10, 11 and 12, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, pretty much. And I think just because he saw a bit of initiative, he was a real entrepreneur, and he just took me under the wing, and I learnt quite a bit. He offered me a job when I left school. I thought, fantastic, I'll be getting into property development. But as it turned out, he had a debt collection business as well, and he parked me in there, which was completely at odds with anything I thought I was going to be doing.
When you told me that in the little chat we had, a little brief beforehand, I thought, oh, that might have been a surprise. If you thought you were getting into property and development and so on that, and you were debt collecting.
Yeah, well, I often say that most people want to grow up as a little boy, and they want to be an astronaut, a police officer, a fireman, not a debt collector.
Yeah,
so, no, look, it was a very interesting background to running a business, because you saw all of the things where people got caught. You learn a lot about the law, because that's what you're dealing with to collect money and help people get through those challenges. So it was an interesting background. So
what was it like? What was did you get trained in it? What was the experience for you?
I was all tough guy behind the phone stuff. What I did teach you to be was a good salesperson. Yeah. Because obviously what you're trying to do is collect money from people, and you've either got to work out whether they've got none or they're just being difficult to get it out of.
And how do you go about that?
Look, you learn to define what the hot button is. Back in the day, we had two directed companies and husbands and wives. Often wife didn't know what he was up to, and you just basically start focusing in on her to get his attention, and sure enough, that would do it pretty much every time.
Yeah, and that would get some results and some action.
Absolutely.
Oh, interesting. Very interesting. So how did you progress on from there? So how long did you do the debt collection for?
So I was in it for 9 years, and
that's a long period.
Yeah, it was. One job out of school before I got into Hire A Hubby. And funny thing, I had a lawn mowing business when I was 15, and it was just a wheelbarrow. I was in a dead end street, and it was just half a dozen neighbours that wanted to get their grass cut, and it sort of came and went. I was about 19. Cars and girls, far more expensive than my salary as a debt collector was able to pay for, and I was lying there one night, and I thought, I'll start that lawn mowing business up. There's a couple of kids in the street that are fairly thrifty. I'll see if they want to do a bit of work, and sure enough, that's what happened. And it was back in the day where pretty much lawns were the only thing that households were outsourcing as far as home maintenance goes.
Yeah, I remember that. It was probably lawns or kids doing car washes on the weekends for
that's pretty much
bucks, wasn't it?
So a couple of franchises are into the lawn space, well established, and you could just see that that was something that was going to continue to grow. And so with my little lawn mowing business, I had a couple of kids, like I said, doing the work during the week. I'd work on the weekends, Saturday, do the bigger stuff. Customers started to say, while you're here, can you clean the gutters, cut the tree down, take the rubbish to the tip? And I really saw that as something that was going to be a burgeoning area. But just as quick as I noticed that, the boss said I want to open an office in Melbourne, so I packed up and moved down there to kick off the first of his interstate offices at a fairly young age. So it was a bit of a baptism of fire in terms of learning to run a business, because I started with me and a secretary, and about 18 months later, at 24, I had 30 staff. So it was a grow up quick moment. But that's where I got in. Oh, sorry.
And what from that experience there, what was the most challenging part of that? If you can remember back.
Well, look, what it was basically there was nowhere to run and hide. You had to accept all the responsibility. I was 1,000 kilometres away from the boss. He'd sent me down there with the trust to set something up for him. And so it was really a case of roll the sleeves up, get on with it, and deal with the tough moments, and you learn on the run. But at the same time, I think what it taught me to do was, get connected with people. So I joined a lot of sort of networking groups down there, met a bunch of older, more experienced people, and created a network. And I think when people see a young guy having a crack, they're quite happy to stick their arm around your shoulder and take you on the journey. And I got a lot of that. So I was
when I see young people really trying to make their way in the world. And people, I mean, they probably look fondly back on their own experiences, don't they?
Well, that's it. I mean, if I see a young guy coming through now and I look at the benefits I got with people, if I'm able to help in some way, it's nice to be able to repay what was given to me along the way.
Mm. So the mowing rounds and everything that were going on at this stage and those other businesses, was that parked for the moment or?
Yeah, look, I end up selling the business off. And then, like I said.
But before you do that, you still, even running it as a part-time side thing, you were still able to generate enough value in it to sell it off?
Yeah, it was. It was a good business because, I basically banked the full-time wage that I was earning, in the debt collection business and just lived off what I was making through the lawnmower business. So it was a good springboard. And I look back now, and if it wasn't for that, I moved to Melbourne, bought a property when I got down there, and I knew nothing about leveraging equity and things like that. When it came to investing in Hire A Hubby, I was able to do that because I'd already got my foot into the property market, gained a bit of dough out of the value increase in the property, not thinking that was really the
purpose of it.
Yeah, that's right. I was just a young guy. I didn't want to pay rent.
Oh, good on you. Well done. I think so. From then on, so now I'm picturing you're in Melbourne. You've got this debt collection business you're going. You've moved on the property business. You've bought a place. When was it? So, and that was the only role you had prior to Hire A Hubby. So when was the transition to Hire A Hubby? What happened in between there?
Well, it was interesting because, part of being in the debt collection game is you need lawyers, and we had a Melbourne-based lawyer that we'd been using as an agency. So when we moved down there, ironically, I actually shared office space with him. It turns out he was the lawyer for the founder of the Hire A Hubby business and wrote the original franchise agreement. And we were having lunch one day and conversation came up. He said, I've got something I want you to have a look at. And he knew the background of the lawn mowing business because we just chatted over a beer or whatever it was when I first got to know him. And he said the founder of Hire A Hubby, he's been going for a year now, wants to expand into New South Wales with a master franchise. You're a New South Wales boy. Any thoughts on whether you might want to go and do that and work for yourself? And that's pretty much where it began.
It's amazing where the opportunities come from, isn't it?
It is, absolutely.
Yeah. So what was the process then? So were you the first master?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So it was it's a bit of a blind leap of faith, but I guess when you're a young guy, you can do that. I was 26 when I made the investment. And so you don't have a whole lot of experience, but it's, in my case, I guess I had a fair bit of confidence. I had that apprenticeship, if you like, of being a quasi business owner because, like I said, I'd moved to Melbourne and had to stand on my own 2 feet there. So I had a really good sort of practice run, with someone else's money. And then when we got into it, for our own investment purpose, it felt like the grounding was good.
What was your take on franchising at that time?
Well, I'd sort of obviously become aware of franchising because I was looking at who the lawn mowing brands were when I was running that lawn mowing business. Yep. And I saw the expansion, that each of them had gone through, and I thought, well, there seems to be a good opportunity here. Read a couple of books. There were a few books around at the time that were sort of introductory.
All American
insights.
Ones, were they?
No, they're actually Gary Williamson, I think his name was, local guy here. Yep. So read up on that. And then just basically got my hands on the documentation. So operations manuals, franchise agreements, master franchise agreements, etc. And I remember going down the coast to where my parents actually now live, and I spent Easter just doing the research on it. And my dad, who's no longer with us, but he said, I can't believe I got you and your sister, both been 9 years in your respective jobs, and you're both looking to change on me at the same time.
Change on him.
Yeah, there you go. So, I had this secure setup with both my kids doing things that were just, looks like they're set for the future. But no, look, just for me, I think I always wanted to be in business for myself. There was only a certain amount of time I was going to stay working for somebody else. And so I spent that Easter, I did the research, had the confidence, and because I had the exposure to this particular type of business,
industry.
I was very confident that this was just going to keep growing, and it certainly hasn't let us down in any way.
I was going to make, pardon the pun, but I can imagine if you were really green to that type of industry, it would have been a lot higher risk, obviously.
Yeah,
so you
absolutely.
wouldn't have had any idea. I mean, you would have known quoting, you would have known how much you were going to get from that job. So you would have known you had a base you were going to get, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So how did you go about it? How did you set up? So you'd have to relocate back from Melbourne to New South Wales?
Yep.
What was that process and the thinking like there? Was there a bit of trepidation, or did you know what your next steps were going to be to get this thing up and running, and what were your first moves?
Yeah, look, to be honest, the greatest trepidation was actually coming back because I'd really created a good life for myself in Melbourne. So, I was in my mid-20s when I moved down there, later 20s by the time I came back. And I actually put a guy on to work for me in Hire A Hubby because I was really reluctant to want to finish up. I was on a contract as well, which was going to finish in the early part of 98. But I had one of those conversations with my then boss, and I just felt let down around his approach to his value that he put on me, and I realised then that now was the time, and so the relocation, I'd come back here to Sydney, found offices, set everything up so I was ready to go because I had the guy working for me. So it was effectively I drove back from Melbourne on a Saturday, and I started full-time work in my own business on the Monday. So it was a fairly quick transition. There was no time to mess around, and obviously with a new business like that, it was getting franchise inquiries. This is back in the day where it was sticking that in the Sydney Morning Herald in the business for sale section.
And stuff. Yeah.
You'd be lucky to get 50 calls. Yeah. So it was very hard to be proactive when you only had one franchisee. And I realised pretty quickly what I'd got myself into with a set of fees to pay to the franchisor of the day, and trying to make a living pretty quickly. So we were lucky that we got moving and we got a lot of sales. Well, we got reasonable franchise sales fairly quickly.
So what was the growth like? What was the growth like in, say, the first 2 years?
6, 12, 24.
6, 12, 24.
Yeah, that was pretty much how it went. So 6 in the first year, 12 in the second year, 24. That's then when we really had a good catalyst then to, the base was there. We had a royalty stream that was able to cover the majority of the cost. But obviously, like, a lot of these businesses, you're reinvesting a lot of what you make out of the sale of franchises back into the growth of the business. And that's essentially my journey.
So that was for the New South Wales Master. Where were most of your territories being sold then? Where were you picking up most of them?
Interestingly, it's always the way, isn't it? They were scattered so far apart that you can't, beggars can't be choosers back then. Yeah. So our first ever franchise was on the Central Coast. The second one was in Camden. And so, sorry, the first one was in Camden. Second one was on the Central Coast. Third one was in Newcastle. So you couldn't have got a worse spread. And then all of a sudden we filled up the St George Sutherland Shire. It was almost like that's where our office was, and it was just pure coincidence. It wasn't because our office was there, but we just went into a saturation mode there, and it's like, why can't I get a couple on the eastern suburbs, the northern beaches, and the inner west, etc., and sprawl out? But inquiries are what they are, and it's no different today. People make their inquiry based on seeing an ad, and where they come from is anybody's guess.
Yes, exactly, wherever they may be at the time. So, okay, so how long were you running the Master for? Because you obviously were running the New South Wales Master, and I think you alluded to it a bit there, that you were looking at that royalty stream going to the national franchisor. When was it starting to look like you wanted to look at the national franchisor rights? Yeah, look, the founder, I sort of had a sense, with my background, that things weren't going as well as they could be. And there was just a couple of telltales there that I saw an opportunity. We ended up in a role reversal. Long story short, we ended up as franchisor, but it was conditional upon him taking on the Vic Master franchise, which didn't last a whole lot longer. He was in the business for another 9 months, and we ended up taking that back as well. So he flipped it from you taking, okay. Yeah, I became franchisor, he became master, which didn't go that well for him and his mindset, but he was in a position where that was probably his best choice at the time. But unfortunately... Why was that? Why do you think that was? Look, he just got himself into probably over his head as far as his business background and taking the next steps with the business. So thankfully for me, it turned out that way because, we were able to take it over and sort of, we ended up, 97, I sort of bought the rights. 98 sort of kicked off my role full time. 99, we were in conversation with him for a 2000 takeover. By 2001, we had the Vic Master, and by 2002, Queensland was running under our banner as well. So, went from one office to 3 in the space of 4 years, which was, and look, at that stage, I had the enthusiasm for, had no kids at that point. We, from a family perspective, had based in Sydney, but had I had all my friends from my time in Victoria, relatives up in Queensland. So the ability to go and visit people and turn that into a trip where I could get some lifestyle benefit out of it. We'd go up there and run a franchise recruitment campaign. I'd spend a week in that particular office, then come home and then do the same thing in the other state, and we just rolled around for 3-month cycles, and it was a really good way. And certainly, the other thing it did was keeps you connected with your staff in the other states, had very strong connections with our franchisees, which was that sort of bond there is an important part of growing the business. And I was listening in, where one of the guys was talking to you before, Neil, and he said he came in to interview me around what my plans were for the business before he wanted to tie himself to the wagon. And I've got no problem with that. It's got to be something that is going to work for everybody. So he made the right sort of inquest. It was funny because I remember him standing, look at our big wall map, and apart from sort of turning around and sort of looking between his legs backwards, that was about the only thing he didn't do to try and dissect what was available in his territory. So with that in mind, what about the rest of the territories? So the rest of the country, what does that look like for you when expansion and that? So where is Hire A Hubby now? Is it's totally national.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So look, part of my journey was when I took over as franchisor, I sold South Australian Queensland office a master franchise, which effectively funded the whole acquisition of the franchisor rights, which obviously worked out very well for us. But the long story short, the Queensland territory, the guy who bought South Australia bought both, realised quickly that he wasn't going to make the appropriate investments in Queensland and basically negotiated to give Queensland back. Timing for me was perfect because we'd sort of taken Melbourne on in 01, like I said, and July 2002 we took back Queensland, set up our own office, and it just took off from there. So I was very happy to have the East Coast. Being in Sydney, it's an hour either way on the plane to Brisbane and Melbourne, and we've got a master franchise in South Australia and another one in WA that looks after Northern Territory. So it works well for us.
And how many locations you got now? How many Hire A Hubby?
Circa 300.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Right. And where's the primary growth now that you're seeing?
Look, it's East Coast still. I mean, just because of population numbers. So we've obviously got our operation in the UK as well, and we're hoping to see that go. Now, I mean, they've really suffered. Not that we all suffered with COVID, but because of obviously coming out of that, then you've had on top of the inflationary pressures, you got Ukraine war going on, all sorts of things that have just added to the potential for problem to exist.
In that European market,
but it's come good now. We're starting to see growth again, which is what we all want to see.
It's interesting. Was that always in your mind that you were going to do international growth, or were you pretty much still just focused on Australia? When did the international sort of idea pop up for you?
Look, I went over in 2004. So the Oz Trade and Franchise Council of Australia both combined to take a group of wannabe international expansionary franchisors over. Very good program. We went up to the Expo up in Birmingham, met a whole bunch of locals on the ground. We had a look at a couple of other things in between 2004 and 2007 when we effectively decided we're ready to go. So I went back in 2007 on my own trip, met all those people that I'd met in 2004 and sort of put the pieces of the puzzle back together. And we had a Victorian-based franchisee who was moving to England. He wanted to explore the opportunity of a franchise over there. And I said, well, look, we're looking for a master franchise. So he actually took on a small master to start with. About a year later, we sold the rest of the UK off to a guy with some good franchising pedigree. But like things happen in life, Glenn, they don't all go perfectly. And that sort of, bubbled along for a little while without doing a whole lot. And we just took the decision in 2017 to take the masters back and put our own people that were long-term Hire A Hubby people from Australia who knew our culture, our systems, our methods, and went over there. And we went from 6 to 25 pretty quickly and sort of got a good base there. And that's what we're looking to build on now.
I think so. You come across them, and you see it quite often, a bunch of franchisors from here taking their concepts overseas, and there's hits and misses.
Yeah.
And the spits and spats and starts. And from what I can see, just, from the outside looking in, many of them take a lot longer than they thought.
They do.
That it would take.
And look, I've got to be honest.
To get that traction.
It's a funny thing. I'm a big Formula One fan, and I like the idea of being able to go and visit my business in the UK and visit as many Grand Prix as I can while I'm over there. For it. So I'd always go up and, if I was going to England, I might go in via Turkey or go in via, Monza, come back via Singapore or, whatever the calendar was doing at the time. Or if I was there, head over to Spain for the weekend or, just pick up a Grand Prix, go to the British Grand Prix, of course. So being able to combine the expansionary ideas that we had with a bit of personal...
with some lifestyle as well, absolutely, some benefits you got out of it as well.
You don't want to work hard for nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Hire A Hubby business, when we were talking before, and you were talking about as you were growing this and the franchise partners to grow their business and grow their impact in their marketplace and everything, you were talking about broadening their skill base.
Yep.
Because you're talking about they're quite general handymen. Can you fill me in your thoughts on the role that you see of the Hire A Hubby franchise partner playing in the community as far as what services they're offering?
Look, what we saw, Glenn, was there was a real... Once you build a relationship, customers would call you back again and again. And we did some research in 2019, and a first-time customer average invoice, this was taken over 3 years' worth of data, the first-time invoice, brand new customer, $660. If that customer shopped again within 12 months, the second invoice averaged $1,360, so more than doubled. And so all of a sudden, what would be a simple, small handyman job would be, I like this guy who's come from Hire A Hubby. I trust him. He's got the police checks. He's got the photo ID, the insurances, licenses. And that was really the catalyst catalyst for us saying, well, we know that these guys are going to get a lot more of these bigger jobs because they create relationships. Now we need to make sure we can legitimise their ability to do it. So we started talking with some RTOs around how we could take our guys and say, well, how do we take them from a Cert 1 licence into a Cert 3 carpentry, into what's called in our world a kitchen, bathroom, laundry renovation licence.
So just before, so people who don't know, Cert 1 licence is...
So Cert 1's like it's a handyman licence, if you wanted to put it into simple terms. It's got restrictions around what you can do based on, and again, this changes from state to state, so we've got to be very cautious with this being a national opportunity. But what it is, it's restricted works, and then obviously to move out of that handyman licence, we saw Cert 3 carpentry, kitchen, bathroom, laundry renovation as an obvious thing because there are a lot of projects, if you look at decks, pergolas, that sort of stuff, so having the right skill set to be able to say yes, and that's where we sort of get to our top end. We don't want to get into house builds and things like that. We're not a building business, but repairs, maintenance, renovations is where we see an opportunity. And that really drove the opportunity for franchisees to grow these things into something a lot bigger than a handyman business. A lot of guys will think handyman work's a small sort of knick-knack stuff. But we've got guys that might start as a man in a van who are doing 250 grand a year in sales, and we can have another business who's doing $2 million out of a single territory. So being able to do those bigger jobs makes it easier to put your staff onto jobs that are better returning jobs because you're not scheduling 5-10 jobs in a day. There's might be on a job for 2, 3, 4 days or even longer. So
much more efficient, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So does everyone then who comes in and goes through training get the Cert 1?
Correct.
Is that how it works?
Yeah.
And then do they all have to go up to that Cert 3, or do they just...
No, that's a choice.
What they're after?
Yeah, so what it is, our training course has been accredited so that you get the Cert 1 by completion. Obviously, you've got to pass all of the elements that go with it. But then getting into the Cert 3 is the next step through our Pathways program that's available to everybody, whether they choose to do it or not. Some guys like the smaller jobs. They say the smaller fish are the sweetest, and they stick with it. Low risk, easy to do. Probably suits some of our elder guys because the physicality's not there where you start doing bigger jobs where there's a lot of manual labour or there's ladders involved. A lot of guys as they get older don't want to get on roofs anymore. So there's all those sorts of considerations.
Totally reasonable.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's funny, I've spoken to a number of service franchisors over the years, and many of them lament the fact that franchisees in territories aren't doing enough sales, that they should be doing more, they should be turning over more than 150, 170, 200K. Where quite often I think it just comes down to that's just what the person wants to do.
That's it. Yeah, and look, we've got what we call bronze, silver and gold level franchises and their demographics. And what we look at is if you're in a gold territory, we're looking for somebody who wants to grow that because the opportunity is typically, and this is all based on demographics, it is typically going to be a bigger opportunity. So we don't want somebody squatting on a territory that's going to be underdone. But that said, I mean, what none of us can predict, with any 100% accuracy is future growth. I mean, yes, we can sort of pick up on things that might be going on from time to time through announcements that there's obviously going to be an expansion. You look at the southwest of Brisbane or the southwest of Sydney or western Victoria, Melbourne now. We know the growth's coming there. What we found though, Glenn, over the course of time is if we've got a guy who's sort of hit the limits that he's, he wants to work no more and he's making enough money, we started to cut the territories in half with their authority where they can get their money back on their original purchase. We create a second territory so we get another royalty stream. But, if a franchisee can get his money back and continue to trade and then still have something else it's a win for everybody. So
how many take up on that? Are there many?
Oh, look, it's not huge, but it's just one of the things that we've tried to say to our guys, look, we're not going to force you into doing it, but if there's an opportunity where we can all make more out of it because you don't want to do any more, but there's demand, then let's find a way to bring somebody else in who can service those customers.
So I think you were saying earlier on, correct me if I'm wrong, that when you acquired the rights national, you had about 30, there was about 30 to 40 franchise partners, and now you're at 300 plus. What's been the key factors in growth there, and what's been those key surges in growth, or has been quite consistent across that time depending on activity?
I think our technology was probably the biggest thing because back in the day, I mean, it's a pretty cottage industry when you look at what handyman sort of work was. So when I started out, a guy would have a trailer, can you believe it, a trailer, towing these big heavy buggers of things around. They had a triplicate invoice book.
Tough to manoeuvre around.
Oh, they are. And then guys would stop towing them around because they were a pain to park, they were heavy, and all of a sudden they're driving around in unbranded vehicles. So we scrapped the trailers, we got into vehicles, sign written. Fourth most common source of new business, just as an anecdote, is people seeing one of our sign written vehicles. So you want to make sure they're out there and giving themselves the opportunity. But, moving away from, getting a text message with a job that says, give Glenn a call about the job he wants done, we knew that we've, given you 10 offers that week or, 40 in a month. We get your P&L at the end of the month, but we couldn't tell what you'd done with any of the customers and what drove into that financial outcome. So back in 2011, we were looking to really upscale our insights into what our franchisees were doing. And there was no off-the-shelf job management system. So we wanted a better CRM than we had, and we wanted a job management piece. And long story short, we ended up through a third party who helped us pull together a deal. We hooked up with Salesforce. We built our own bespoke job management system. And all of a sudden, we could see all of the insights that helped us coach our franchisees to know when they should be looking to put a new staff member on. We could predict based on their conversion rates, lead to quote conversion, quote to invoice conversions, average dollars, average GP. You could forecast accurately what was coming and what was required to be able to then say, well, Glenn, you're able now, based on these numbers, to look to put somebody on here, and all of a sudden the businesses took off. So that was a real catalyst.
Which made
for growth.
them more saleable, obviously.
It does, yeah. And when you've got guys that are coming in and they're running businesses and you've got no ability to see it and they're often too busy, the ability to coach was just impossible. So that insight was probably the best thing that we did from a business growth perspective. And to this day, if a franchisee calls up and there's an issue, you just log in and within seconds I can see through our dashboard setup exactly who, what, where, and you can give some advice instantly.
So 2011, my guess is that you guys would have been ahead of the curve for that at that time.
Yeah, well,
there would have been a bit going on, but as far as this in franchising with that type of off the shore, you building your own software for it, that would have been ahead. Yeah,
look, I think CRMs have been around for, not forever, but they've been around for a long time. And I'd sort of looked at Salesforce and wasn't quite ready for the sort of investment. Couldn't find a job management piece, which sort of pushed us down the path of creating something for ourselves. And the irony was when we sort of put the CRM together with the job management piece, we had a couple of clever people in the Hire A Hubby business who liked technology, and they started to play around with and understand what else was possible. And we basically created an end-to-end solution. So we could recruit the franchisee, onboard them, manage them all the way through until they sold and moved on, and the whole thing was on the one platform.
Data seamless in one spot.
Yeah, and it just kept evolving to the point where we ended up white labelling it and taking it to market as its own play.
Yeah, and what role does that have in the business now? So that's a totally separate part of the business,
is
it?
It's a very, very heavily integrated part of the business. So, we call it, our badge for it's called Hubby Connect. One of our franchisees picked that at our conference in 2011 as part of a bit of fun and engagement and competition. But now Franchise Cloud Solutions is the provider of the tech solution, but it also provides solutions to other franchise brands in the sector. So it's part of our day-to-day. So everyone in our head office is using the solution. All of our franchisees are using it. Their staff are tapping into it. So it's a very big part of our day-to-day.
So one thing we didn't touch on then was your growth there. So has that growth been consistent across that time? So you're now 300 plus now. Has there been surges in it, or what have you found as far as attracting franchise partners to the business, and what are the things that are attracting them? So the things that really stand out for you, it's got to come across you and the time periods that they're coming in.
Look, we're like every franchise brand, I think at the moment. There was a stagnation in recruitment through the whole COVID period, obviously, because people weren't going to part with investment dollars when they couldn't be guaranteed they can go and work, particularly when you look at Melbourne for us with the worst lockdown, and our guys were prohibited from going into people's houses, which is where they do a lot of the work. Yeah. But typically what we're seeing now, Glenn, is I think, our guys that, you've interviewed today, a man in a van, a multi-person enterprise, they're the three categories that we describe here. Each can choose to be whatever they like. They can change their mind and go up and down. So flexibility, absolutely. I think now that guys are realising the sort of money they can make is it's not this knick-knack handyman business. This is a professional property maintenance solution that you can go and make very good money. For some of our bigger guys, we've got a group of them coming together tomorrow, and one of the things we're talking about is, an asset accumulation strategy, because two or three of the guys that were here today are working out of warehouses. So one of the things we look to do is say, well, how can we help you buy a warehouse through some investment structure, use the trading entity to pay rent and create a tax deduction on that expense, and get some capital growth out of something you actually need to run your business. So if you've got 10 vehicles and a couple of admin staff, a heap of tools, a lot of materials.
So you need warehousing.
You need somewhere, So warehouses are a good way to help them create the right space to run their business, at the same time create an asset. So
it's interesting. I think it's important that you're doing a lot of content on it, because just the Hire A Hubby business, the first thing that comes to mind is a man in a van.
Yep.
I think, and probably does for many people, even potential customers, I suppose.
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, the customer just wants to know they're going to get a reliable service. For a business owner, I guess what we're trying to highlight is there's not one size fits all here. And ironically, Steve, who's one of our regional franchisees, I think 3 or 4 of our highest turnover franchises are in remote regional areas. It's not that you don't have the same. He's narrow. Yeah. Another guy down in Latrobe Valley, another one up in Cairns are among our top turnover franchises. And
what do you think that is? What do you think that is?
Just completely random. It really is. It's
you've got all this data. You're like,
no, but I think
it's hard to explain.
It's just unique that these guys happen to be there. I mean, there's other very, very big turnover businesses. We've got 6 or 7 just in northern Brisbane over $1.5 million turnover each. So
do you think that comes from, and sorry to interrupt there, but do you think that comes from just such strong brand recognition? If they've got so many vehicles out there and that sort of stuff, do you think it just becomes cumulative, that whole?
I think Neil described it in the interview he did with you, and that is that our guys don't compete with one another. So we've got 12 of the guys that are in our enterprise group coming together tomorrow, and they are the quickest to share information with one another. Neil, you looked on his shirt with his franchisee of the year.
He was like a war veteran.
It was.
He won a franchisee of the year.
He won the 2008 National Franchisee of the Year, and he coached the guy who beat him the following year on how to do it. And that's a pretty impressive insight into the. It does. And I think, the Northern Brisbane guys I was just talking about, I think, when one does it, that creates belief that others can. And if they've got an open mind on what, where and how to do it, we bring our guys together every opportunity. It's obviously a lot easier now that COVID's behind us, but that support group structure where the guys come together and they can share their war stories and what worked, what didn't, what's the next challenge. For a business owner, I love getting involved in that because I love to know what the next thing that they need to conquer is, because then it keeps your mind sharp in trying to help them come up with that solution. It's not to say I'm going to be the only one who can do that, but I like that challenge of what's next, how do we conquer it, and do it with the franchisees collaboratively.
And because you are very much an advocate of the franchise system, obviously, or franchise business model, because you're very heavily involved in the franchise council as well. So you're all about that franchise collegiate networking, getting together, learning from each other, which is just everything that franchising is all about. So tell us about your involvement with the franchise council, because I know you're the chairman of the franchise council. Yep. What do you get from that? Does it take away much from your business time? I mean, because I've seen you quite a bit recently with a few things you've had to do with government and everything. Yeah. Tell us about the role of chairman of the FCA.
It goes through cycles, Glenn. Obviously we appointed a new CEO, so there was a period of 4 or 5 months where we had an interim CEO into the recruitment of a new CEO. So I was as busy doing the chair role as I was my other 2 business interests. I
bet you were.
But I mean,
I saw so much of you.
Well,
through FCA stuff, not through Hire A Hubby.
Exactly. Look, to be honest with you, franchising's been where I've had my last 25 years. So I want to, I've enjoyed being part of it. I think franchising's misrepresented horribly in terms of, you might have 8 or 10 brands that have done things that are considered poor form, and yet there's another 1,200 brands that, if you look at the franchise register, who aren't doing bad things. It's a really good way to do business. I
totally agree. I totally agree. And if I've spoken to dozens of franchise owners in multiple brands over the last several weeks now, who are just ragingly happy about what they've been presented, what's on offer, and the support they get. It does disappoint me when I see misrepresentation like that and everyone tarred with a handful of players tar the entire business model, which is just inaccurate.
It is, and I've met some very, very good people who have done extraordinarily good things from a business sense, not just for what they've created for themselves, but the networks of franchise owners that they've created their journeys for them to be successful in their own rights. And, I think the very first FCA function I went to was in 1998, and John O'Brien, who's the founder of Poolworks, was there, and, he was already 7 or 8 years into his journey. And, as simple as shaking his hand and saying hello, and he was ready to share insights and be a guiding hand. And, it's funny, I heard you mention expos earlier today, and I was at the expo, and there's another up-and-coming young brand there who's asking me a few questions around how do you approach, what would you do, etc. And it's nice to be able to provide a little bit back like that. So I was prompted just to get onto the board in 2018. I was lucky enough to be elected. I don't know if I say lucky enough now with all the work I'm doing as chair. And
pleased enough.
Yeah, no, look, I think it's. I'm happy to do something to contribute back because, like I said, franchising is where I've made my living for such a long time.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, mate, it was we've chatted a bit over the years, but not a whole heap, have we? So it's great to understand more about you, your background, your career, and what you're growing here with Hire A Hubby. So thanks so much for joining us today, Brendan.
Pleasure, Glenn. Thank you.
And that's another one for the Franchise Everything podcast. Please like, subscribe, review, comments, questions, throw them in down there. We'll get back to you, and we'll catch you again in the next one soon.